Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Mwesigwa Joseph, and I am an MIT student. Today, I'm going to be presenting about integrated risk management. So, this presentation is going to be based on risk management, and it is going to be about the 4 research papers that we read about that are covering these different perspectives in risk management, such as risk identification, the construction industry practices, the small scale management enterprises. It is also involving proactive risk management approaches, as we see here in the documents here on the slide here. We shall have the essence of risk identification, which was read from George, then risk management in the construction industry, the risk management in small scale management enterprises, and finally we shall discuss about the proactive risk management. So we shall go to the next slide, which is now diving into the risk management. So first of all, a risk is an unexpected event or condition that might have either positive or negative effects on project objectives. So we go ahead and distinguish between a risk and an uncertainty. So a risk is something that can be predicted based on its chances or impact, whereas an uncertainty for it cannot, because in most cases you lack information about it and you cannot determine its outcome. So for every risk, there are usually two factors: the likelihood of the risk occurring, and which I can also call the probability. So it can either occur or not, and after occurring, there can be the second factor. I can call it the effect or the impact after it occurring. So for every risk, those are the two factors that determine the risk. Then we can go ahead and distinguish between the business risk and the project risks. So for a business risk, in case it occurs for it, it affects the entire organization. It affects the entire organization. Whereas if a project risk occurs for it, it affects specifically some project objectives, which we can call time, the cost, the scope, the quality. So that can be the difference between those two. So before, we have to first plan. Risk planning is very important. So projects are very risky ventures. So in most cases, we have to draw a plan so as to minimize the wastage of resources, or if you can schedule delays, you can you can manage your project very well so that you manage the risks. So we can go ahead and the next slide, which is risk identification, and we shall be talking about the techniques and the risk register. First of all, risk register is the key deliverable of risk planning, as for it documents each risk, its category, the possible causes, the strategies, the owner, and status. So this serves to guide the project team throughout the project life cycle. As you go on with the project, it will guide you. So all these things are documented in the project register. So during risk identification, we use methods such as interviews. Interviews, this is where you go to face-to-face conversation with someone. You talk with them directly so that they can uncover their hidden risks. We have the SWOT analysis, whereby it evaluates your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats for risk classification. Another thing, we have document review. This is where you review some documentations that were made, some records that were written sometime before, to identify risk, some recurring risk patterns. Then you can use brainstorming, where there are group sessions to generate a broad list of potential risk events. Then we have expert opinions, drawing on, which includes drawing on experienced professionals to identify domain-specific risks. There are those people who are always experienced, so they can easily identify those domain risks. So at the end of it all, when we use all these methods and identify risks, they are all documented in the risk register, right? So we can go ahead and look at the risk analysis and response strategies. So after identifying these risks, we go ahead and analyze them using two methods. We have the risk analysis, we have the qualitative analysis and we have the quantitative analysis. So qualitative risk analysis, for it prioritizes risks using the probability and impact matrix. And here in most cases, they are shown in color codes. For example, if it is major or a high risk, you find it is in red. If it is some medium risk, you find it is yellow. And if it is a minor risk, you find it in green. Whereas under qualitative risk analysis, numerical methods are used to, to estimate the cost and time patterns and their impact. So it uses some decision tree, sensitivity analysis, and simulation. So after analyzing these risks, we go ahead, and apply response strategies to these risks. And these include one, avoiding. By avoiding, so you have to reduce the probability or the impact of that risk from occurring. Then we mitigate. This is reducing the likelihood and severity of the impact. We also use another strategy called exploit, where we use more resources to leverage opportunity. Go ahead and enhance. This is by adding resources to speed up or improve the outcomes. Then we transfer. This includes shifting the liability to the third party. Third party, the people who are not involved in the risk. The third party people, so you can shift the liability to them. Then research. So you have to learn more about the risk so as to get more solutions for it in case it is occurring. So here the goal is to minimize the negative impacts on the organization, and at the end of it all maximize the outcomes. So we can go to the next slide, which is about assessment of risk management. This is another document which where the study was done in Iraq and used mixed research method, and their final objectives, which included the time, the cost, and quality. So this document had research in areas about methods used to identify the risks, the risk monitoring and controlling procedures, then the relationship between risk management and the project success. So let's dive in this document. So these are the key findings and the barriers. So when this study was carried out in Iraq, there are some this study investigated how risk management is used in the construction projects, whereby so under the key findings, they realized there is low risk management adoption, whereby the use of the formal risk management techniques in Iraq's building construction is very minimal. The local constructors cannot apply these risk management techniques. Then another finding was qualitative over quantitative. They realized most companies and those other construction companies are majorly relying on qualitative methods for identifying and analyzing risks over the quantitative approaches. Another one was there was no dedicated risk management team. There was absence of a risk management team within the project management culture in the critical barrier. Then another thing was training and knowledge gap. there was lack of risk management training and knowledge within construction firms, and this prevents effective risk management. So this study looks at how risk management affects project success in terms of time, in terms of cost, and quality. And again, this study shows that weak risk management leads to poor project performance. So we can go to the next slide. Risk management in scale, small scale medium enterprises. So there was a systematic literature review and the future directions whereby they analyzed 61 papers and there were three major risk management streams that were found. So these enterprises have unique challenges in risk management compared to the large firms. So these small scale industries or the medium industry enterprises, they usually have limited resources, and that's why they find challenges in risk management. So they end up not using the suitable strategies. So one of the findings that were identified is that these small scale firms should adopt comprehensive strategies, not just these financial ones. They should be comprehensive so as to improve the performance of their businesses. Going on to the next slide. So this is the findings and the future directions. We can see the streams, they are financially. So we can continue to the enterprise. Enterprise is around 70%, project risk management is 52, supply chain 40, strategic risk management 35, operational risk management 28. So this is how the study was. And under the key insights, these small scale enterprises are the backbone of the European economic growth. But most times, as we talked about it, risk management is so different from the way it is done in the large farms. Why? Because these small scale farms have limited resources. So here it is often informal. In these small scale farms, it is informal, reactive, and often owner driven rather than being systematic. So for the future research to be carried out, it should focus on integrated and cross sector risk management frameworks which are specifically designed for the small scale enterprises. Going ahead, we have proactive risk management. This is a forward-looking approach to anticipating and addressing risks before they become problems. Sometimes there are risks that are there that you can solve early before them happening. Why? Because you want to minimize losses. Others, in case they happen, they can really affect the business greatly. So some risks are easier to handle before they occur. So in this process, you have to prevent the risk before it happens. So at first, you have to, after you go through steps, you anticipate the risk, you go ahead, there's preventing the risk, preparing, and then responding. So what is the aim here? So the aim here is to prevent this risk from occurring, is to avoid this idea of reacting to the problems. So in this case, instead, you have to just prevent them rather than reacting to them after. Then going to the next slide, we have proactive versus reactive. So reactive, this is where you have to react to the risk after it has occurred. But proactive, you prevent it before it occurs. So this was the comparison between these risk management techniques. So in the dimension of timing, reactive is based on risk, like taking action after the risk occurring, whereas under proactive, you take the action before the risk occurs. In the orientation, reactive is problem focused, proactive is opportunity and threat focused. Then in the driver dimension, for it is crisis response. Proactive is usually continuous scanning and planning. Then in another dimensions of tools being used, in the reactive you use incident reports because the risk has already occurred. While in the proactive you can use scenario planning, the early warning systems. Then in the if you talk about the culture, in the reactive you fix something when it's like fixing something after it is broken. But in the proactive, you prevent it from breaking. So this is preventing the risk from occurring. So in the terms of costs, reactive is usually higher because reactive measures cost more because the risk has already happened. While you're under proactive, the cost is usually low because you are trying to prevent it from occurring. When we go to the next slide, proactive risk management framework. There are the key principles. There are some key principles and the steps which are always involved, which are also included here. One is risk awareness and culture. So here we build an organization culture that actively looks for risks, not one that ignores or hides them. So it is better you look for those risks before they occur so that you act accordingly. Then environmental scanning. So you have to continuously monitor the internal and external environments for early warning signals of emerging risks. In case there is some warning signs that occur, you act early. Then risk anticipation. Sometimes you have to use scenario planning and focusing to imagine what could go wrong before it does. So you anticipate some things so that by the time they come, you're already aware, you know what, you take action earlier. We have preventive action. So you have to design and implement measures that reduce the probability of identified risks occurring, probability of those identified risks from occurring. So you have to have that preventive action. The step 5 you can do is contingency planning. You have to prepare response plans in advance so the team can act quickly if a risk occurs, not just when the risk occurs, then that's when you start thinking of what to do. So you will have you ought to have that plan always in case the risk happens. You have that plan of what to do next. Then we have review and learning. After every risky event happens, you have to capture the lessons and update the risk management system accordingly. You note down those lessons learned so that they can help you in the future when maybe same risk happens. Going to the next slide, we have comparative analysis. This is the comparative analysis for those 4 papers, whereby the first paper focused on risk identification and planning. The second paper focused on the construction industry in Iraq. Then the third paper focused on risk management, the small scale enterprises, and the paper 4 is anticipatory, the about the the proactive risk management. So these are the summaries, and going to the conclusions. Risk management is the foundation. So you cannot, sorry, sorry, I was talking about that you cannot manage what you have not identified. So you have to usually look into those risks. Risk identification is the key. So we also saw the small scale enterprises lack holistic risk management mechanisms. So despite the existing frameworks, adoption of the formal risk management techniques remains low as studied in the Iraq under the construction industry. So preventing these risks before they occur is far more than responding to those actions which we discussed reactive versus the proactive. So risk management is continuous. So risks should continue to be monitored, updated, and responded to through the entire project. Thank you. And these are the references where I got this content from. Thank you.